Hey everybody, today I'm going to show you part 3 of how to make Don't Tap the White Tiles with Swift and Xcode. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright everybody, open up your whitetiles.xcode project, and we are just going to make this a bit bigger, and head over to our viewcontroller.swift. Now first thing we need to do in here is head right above our view.did_load, and I'm just going to add a variable. Of course you can add the variable wherever you want, but I'm putting it right above the view.did_load for some reason. So now say var, and this will be our score, will be equal to an integer. Then we need to create another variable, and this will be our high score. And this will be equal to an integer as well. Now inside of our view.did_load, we want to create an NSUserDefault, and this is going to be used to store our integers. So we can say var high score default will be equal to, and this is going to be equal to an NSUserDefaults.standard user defaults. Then you need to go down here and say high score default, or actually you need to set your high score equal to your high score default for a certain key. So in this case we would need to say if open parentheses close parentheses if the high score default dot value, or this is going to be a value for key, and our key, we're just going to call our key high score. We haven't created this key yet, and this is kind of what it's testing. It's testing whether this key has either been created or if it's equal to nil, meaning that the high score has nothing inside of it. So we say high score default dot value for key equals or is not equal to nil, meaning that there's something inside of this high score default. So when there's something inside of this, then we want us to set our high score or equal to our high score default dot value for key, and again the key name will just be high score. Close that off. Right now we're getting this error that says cannot convert the expressions type parentheses to type string. So right now the high score is actually an integer, and we are storing an integer inside of here, but it doesn't know that. So in order for us to know that, we need to say as an NS integer. So we're just saying, we're overriding whatever they say, and we're saying this is an NS integer. And then down here we need to say else our high score will be equal to 0, because our game would have never been played, so our high score is automatically going to be set to 0. And then down here in our black button down, we need to say either score plus plus, this will add 1 to the integer of the score every time, or you can say score plus equals 10, and this will add 10 to the integer every time. I'm just going to keep mine as score plus plus just to keep things simple. Now I'm going to nslog this just because we don't want to add this into a label just yet. So we're going to say nslog open quotation mark, close quotation mark, open parentheses, close parentheses inside of those quotation marks. Then right before those parentheses add a slash, and this will let us know we are wanting to have an integer inside of our quotation marks. Now erase the rest of there, and now if we were to build and run this, anytime we click the black button, we will see our black button, our score going up. So I just clicked it 4 times. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's going up every time. So that is exactly how we want it. Now another thing you need to do is check to make sure the score isn't getting any greater than the high score. So in order to do this, you just say if the score, it's very simple, if the score is greater than or equal to the high score, or it should just be greater than. If the score is greater than the high score, then we want to set our high score equal to our score, as well as we need to create our high score default. So just go right back up here to your view.did_load, and you can copy our var high score default equals NSUserDefaults.standard user defaults, and just paste that right down here. Now the reason I'm not making this public is because that's kind of the way how Swift works. You need to create an NSUserDefault in every function that you need to use it, instead of making it public where you would usually put it right up here and you can access it from anywhere. So inside of our black button down, we have our high score default. So we need to also set our high score default. So say high score default dot set value, And we are going to set a value, which will be our score. So we're going to set our score equal to our high score again. So just type in for the key high score, open quotation mark, close quotation mark, high score, and be sure you spell it the same way every time or else it's not going to be properly done. So all in all, we just have our if the score is greater than the high score, we're saving the high score equal to the score, and we're also making it save in the background so you can access it later. This is perfect for high scores. Before we build and run this, we need to check and see how our high score is doing without creating a label just yet. So in order to do this, you'll just say ns log, open parentheses, close parentheses, and then open quotation mark, close quotation mark, and then inside of that you go dash, open parentheses, close parentheses again so we can just see our integer. Then you just type in int high score, and now when this view loads, we shall see which high score is being loaded up. Now it is saving in the background, so right now I'm creating a high score right now of 9. So if we were to build and run this, we will get our high score coming up of 9. Now, again, you can click this again over and over again, like so. And if we were to build and run this again, we will have 15 coming up as our high score. Now that's all cool and all, but of course it's not showing up to the person playing the game. So in order to do this, there was actually a huge problem with this. You can't just use a UI label like you normally think you would. So in order to get around this, I'm just going to place a UI label onto our screen, and this is just going to give us a reference of how our UI labels should programmatically look. So we can go into our view.did.load on our Swift viewcontroller.swift file. So go to your viewcontroller.swift, and inside of your view.did.load, we're going to create a UI label. So I'm just going to say var So I'm just going to say var score label will be equal to, and this is going to be equal to a UI label, open parentheses, and this is going to be a frame. So we're setting this equal to a frame of a CG rect, and then open parentheses, and it's going to give us x, y, width, height. Now our x values, we're going to set that as 0, and our y value, we're going to set that as 0. This is just for now because we're going to set it in just a minute by using the center of our label. Now our width, I'm just going to make mine 100, and our height, we're going to make this 20. Now down here, we need to say score label dot center will be equal to, and this is going to be equal to a CG point. So we're going to put this in a point on somewhere on the map. I'm going to get the x value, which is going to make it smack dab right in the middle of our application. X value will be equal to self.view.frame.size.width divided by 2. You're probably like, what? But basically we're taking the view, we're taking the frame of the view, so what is actually being shown to the person, and then we're taking the size of it, and then we're taking the width from the size, if that made sense to you. But then we're dividing that by 2 to just place it straight in the middle of our application. Our y value, I'm just going to actually put mine 20 pixels down. Now if I were to go into my storyboard, you will see that this origin right here is actually 0, 0. So if I were to place an x value and a y value of 0, 0, it would go right there in the middle. Now as you move down, you increase your y value. So I'm going 20 pixels down. That would make me about here-ish, guesstimating. If we can actually go into our label, go to our size adjustment, and this is what I mainly planked the label in here for. So you can actually take this size of the label and apply that to your code. So if we were to have a label of this size, we would want it to be a width of 125, a height of 20-ish, and then our x and y value would be 98 by 28. Now again, this x and y value will be applying to the top left corner of our scene, and we didn't want to work that way. We wanted to work from our center of our origin. So this will be right there in the middle that we are going to be working with. So let's go back to our viewcontroller.swift, and now we're going to take this label and say score label.text will be equal to, and this is going to be equal to open parentheses, open quotation mark, close quotation mark, open parentheses, close parentheses, and then right before those parentheses add a slash, and we're going to put in our score. as our integer. And then now down here we need to say self.view.add subview, and this is going to be our score label that we just created, like so. So now if we were to build and run this, so now as you can see it's built and ran. If we look at this label I forgot to delete, but this label right here is the one I'm mainly worried about. So this is not increasing as I touch on these buttons, which is not good. So in order to do this, let's go back to our our viewController.swift, and we need to go down here to our view.did and just click on this var score label UI label. We want to keep this, but we're going to go and paste that right out here. So now we have var score label equals a UI label. So this is going to be our UI label that we put on there, and it's no longer private just to our view.did. So we are going to be able to use it in our function for black button down. Now up here in our view.did, we now can take away this var score label, so we're not creating a new score label, but we can keep everything else. Now down here in our black button down, we need to say score label.text will be equal to, and this will be pretty much the same thing that we just put there. It's going to be open quotation mark, close quotation mark, open parentheses, close parentheses, and a slash right before those. And we're going to put that as score. And this should actually be done right after we add our score. So just take this, copy, erase it, and we're going to move it right below this score right here. So it's going to be updating alongside our score instead of beforehand where it would be a little bit delayed. So now if we were to build and run this, you will see that it is now increasing along with our tiles are moving randomly. Everything is working perfect now. And of course our label is still there, so head back to your main.storyboard and just delete that label that we created. And now we're going to also create another scene. So in order to do this, say File, New, File. And this is going to be a Swift file, and we'll call this our Game Over scene. Create. Go over to your Game Over scene, and we want to create a new class. The class name, I'm going to call mine Game Over. You can call this whatever you want. And then this will be of the superclass of just a UI view controller. Like so. It's giving me an error right now because I didn't import the frameworks necessary. So we need to say import UI kit. Like so. And then down here in our class properties and methods, we want to have a view did load. And then inside of our view did load, we basically want to load up in the background what our high score is and show that alongside our score. So in order to do this, we need to go back to our viewController.swift. I'm just going to close off this bottom right here. And we want to go back to our view did load right down here. And now when our view loads, we want to set our score equal to 0. So just say score is equal to 0. That will automatically reset the score every time because we don't want the score to be saving every time we load up a new game, because then it would start off at a 20 instead of 0 where it should be. Now down here in our black button down, we also want to set our score equal to an NS user default. So we need to basically copy and paste this method that you have right here where it says var high score default, and then just delete where it says high score and switch that out with score default. And then down here we want to say score default dot set value, and we're going to set our value of score for key, and this is just going to be our temporary score. So I'm just going to put temp score. You can of course just put score or whatever you want. Now let's go back to our game over scene, and we're going to take these two methods right over here that say high score default and score default and paste that right inside of our view did load. Now when the view loads, we want it to load up those methods that we had just created. So I'm first going to just create an NS log, and we will fill that out with something in just a minute. And then inside of our view did load, we can say var score will be equal to our score default dot value for key. This is going to be the value for key for a temp score. And then down here we also want to say var high score will be equal to our score default dot value for key, and this key will be equal to our high score that we created last time. Now we're going to put inside of this ns log something our score. So we're going to load up our score in our ns log, and then we also want to take this and put in our high score. Now it's giving me an error, and I will fix that in just a moment. To fix this error that it's giving me, again, we need to just say as an ns integer. So we're setting it as an ns integer, and that's that. So now if we were to build and run this, you will see that our ns logs will pop up with our score and our high score. So let's go ahead, click on a few of these buttons until we hit 6. And now we have our score and our high score loading up as 6 and 24. So now next thing we need to do is go over to and actually add some labels. Now for some reason, when you actually add these labels onto your main.storyboard via the main.storyboard, something goes wrong. So in order for us to fix this, we need to go over to our GameOverScene.Swift, and we need to programmatically add these labels. So let's close our assistant editor and our bottom scene. Let's go over to our viewcontroller.swift and just copy and paste our score label that we have right here. And we're going to paste that right into our game over scene. And then we also want to do that twice for our high score label, so we can just type in high score label, and this again will be our high score label, and we'll change some of these values in just a second, and this will be our high score label. Now as you can see, we're getting some errors. So right before this first one, we just need to say var, and this is going to make it a variable, so it's going to be used. It's letting us know that it is a UI label. And then another value we need to change is right down here where it says highscorelabel.text, and we just want to put in high score inside of that. And then we want to go down here to our self.view to add subview, and this will be add the subview of our high score label, like so. And this last one I accidentally did wrong. Now let's go ahead, build and run. And we're getting this error that says use of local variable high score before its declaration. That just means this was placed right before we actually create our high score here. So just click, hold, and drag that right above here so we can have our high score and our score built beforehand. Now if we were to build and run, click until we hit 6, and we move over to the next view controller. We have these labels, but one thing you'll notice is the text is black. So one way for us to fix this, we just need to go up here and say self.view.background color will be equal to a UI color.white color. And now if we were to build and run this, you will notice your high score and your score. And they're also going to be overlapping, as I didn't change the Y values for either of them, but you do see them. So now down here in our high score label, we want to set our center equal, or our Y value equal to, we'll say 50, just so it's a little bit below the other one. So it's going to be 50 pixels down. So now hit 6, and we have 6 and 24. This is our score and our high score. Now that's all fine and dandy, but now we actually need to add a function inside of our game over scene so that when a button is pressed, we move back over to our viewcontroller.swift. So in order for us to do this, we just need to say we need to say var, and this will be our back btn will be equal to a UI button, open parentheses, of the frame, and we're going to give it we're just going to get the same frame as these ones right up here. So just copy and paste that frame exactly as you see it. So CG rect, open parentheses, and now we have X, Y is 0, our width is 100, and our height is 20. Now we need to set the center of it by just saying back button dot center is equal to, and this is going to be again equal to our CG point. We're just going to basically take this and change the Y value. So just copy and paste that in, and our Y value will be equal to 160, we'll say. Now we need to actually add this onto our scene, so say self.view.add subview, and we are going to add our back btn. And another thing we need to do is add some text. So say back btn.set title. So we're setting the title equal to back, or play again, actually, play again, for the state UI control state dot normal. So now we actually want to take this back button, and when the button is pressed, we want something to happen. So in order to do this, we say back button.add target. We are going to add a target. The target will be self. And then we need to add an action to this. So in order to add an action, you just say func back. So we are going to call whatever's inside of this back function. So say func back, open parentheses, close parentheses, open curly bracket, close curly bracket, and inside of these, we need to say self.present view controller. And again, we are going to present our view controller. And basically, this is exactly how we did it last time. View controller, open parentheses, close parentheses, animated, true, completion, nil. We don't want anything to happen upon completion. So now we're moving over to our view controller anytime we click on this button. Now say back button.add target self, the action, we need to type in capital S selector, open parentheses and close parentheses, open quotation mark, close quotation mark, and inside of that just type in back. So we are calling the name of our function that we created. For control events, and this will be UI control events dot touch up inside. This means like you touched it and then you released it. So let's go ahead, build and run, and now we should have that back button onto our scene in like so. So we have the back button on our scene, but we actually need to change like the background color of it or something. So we can say back button dot background color is equal to, and we'll just say UI color dot red color. Now let's build and run. Move over to our other scene, and now you can see that we have our play again button here. Click on our play again button, it moves over to the other scene. So in order for us to fix this problem that we have, we need to go down here to our back and just completely delete whatever's inside of there because it wasn't presenting the right view controller. In order for us to do this, we need to say var, and this will be our main storyboard, will be equal to a UI storyboard, open parentheses, with the name of, and this is going to be with the name of main. As you can see that the main.storyboard, you just want to take this first part. And our bundle will be ns_bundle.main_bundle. So it's basically taking from all of these files over here and grabbing with one with the name of main. And then we're going to say var view controller is equal to main storyboard.instantiate view controller with identifier, and we are going to grab with the identifier of view controller, and then this is going to be as a UI view controller. Then go down here and say self.present view controller, and we are going to present the view controller, animated, false, and our completion nil. We don't want anything to happen when we complete this. So now if we were to build and run this, you will actually get an error. So let's go over to here, and you'll see that as soon as I click on this play again button, we get an error. Now in order to fix this, let's go over to our main.storyboard, click on our view controller, and we need to give this a storyboard ID as view controller. So basically the exact same thing that you put inside of your game over scene for whatever you put in right here. Now, if we were to build and run this, we will have our storyboard ID loading with the view controller of our view controller. So now click on 6, we move over to this scene, play again, and it moves back over to the other scene. Play again. That's it for this tutorial. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit that like button down below. And if you want to see more tutorials like this from me in the future, be sure to subscribe. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.